Yo, 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 what is going on, CoD Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mystic Kingdom Builder, and today I wanted to touch and talk about kingdom merges, specifically focusing on what I think the pros and cons are. And really, there's quite a bit, but we're going to dive in. Before we get started, as always, if you enjoy the content, make sure you sub, like, ring the notification bell, and of course, if you want to join and be a part of our conversation, hit up the Discord. You can find a link to that in the pinned comment description right down below. Remember, new videos are coming out every day at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, 14 UTC in-game time. Okay, let's start off with a little bit of the bad, we'll get to the good, and then we'll get to some interesting conclusive thoughts here at the end. So what do I think are some of the cons, or what do I think are some of the challenges that can happen from kingdom merging? Well, I think it's very volatile, meaning that if we compare kind of a standard KvK for something like Rise of Kingdoms, your home kingdom, essentially, right, which is where we're at now, this is all safe, right? All this territory, everything that's already been established, the relationships, you know where you stand, you have all your structures captured, right? You've had to spend time and energy and coordination, writing up mails, resources, etc. on getting everything set up. When you go into a KvK map in Rock, you are essentially transporting, you're teleporting the players and alliances here, right, that are going to go there and fight to this new map. Right, it's almost as though you made a copy of the map, created a second one, and that's where you're going. It pretty much kind of hard protects your home kingdom. However, in Call of Dragons, that is not the case, right? You have, essentially what's happening is they're taking 4 kingdoms, they are combining all the players and that are in those kingdoms, putting them onto a new map like this, and then starting from scratch. That in itself can be volatile to a home kingdom and where they stand. Yes, you do get to play back over from start, but it is something to keep in mind that you can lose things. So there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to establish the same territory. There's no guarantee that you're going to be the biggest kid on the block in your province. There's no guarantee that every single player that was in your alliance is going to rejoin back up once your alliance gets back up to max level. They can join other strong alliances from other servers, other kingdoms. Maybe they join up with their friends and you just had no idea that they had these relationships. There are a plethora amount of hurdles and obstacles that can arise from doing merges that factor into volatility, even beyond a few that I just named. Then you get to things, for example, such as betrayals, right? Betrayals can happen, right? You can have alliances that maybe, or players that'll defect. Maybe they don't, right? Maybe your kingdom appears united, but then all of a sudden, now once the new kingdom, when Season 2 starts and you get the refresh, now maybe you have a few of your top alliances or a few of your active alliances that are going from, you know, being all buddy-buddy, and now they're not so buddy-buddy, right? They're going over to maybe another kingdom, and they're allying with these others, right? So there's just no way of being able to know those things. And really, once more, to kind of further exacerbate this, if you're not going in, or if you never went into your kingdom as a, let's just say an organized group of alliances, and you just went in as an individual alliance, or you have all these other individual alliances that started up, and they just by happenstance were able to come together for somewhat of a common goal, there's no guarantee that that bond is going to be strong enough to hold out right through once you go in. I actually think it would be cool if something like that happened. I mean, we'll maybe touch on that in a later video, but these are just things to be aware of that they can happen. Number 3 here for cons would probably be rogue whales. Rogue whales, what I wrote actually down here is I said rogue whales get automatic fresh meat, which in short kind of is true. If you're a rogue whale and you are, let's just say, the baddest or one of the baddest, strongest players on the kingdom, you know, really, if anything, you're being given a gift, right? You are being given just, you know, God, what does my boy Remy in Ratatouille say? It's like God's gift to cleanliness, right? When he's smelling the food and it just turned out that there wasn't any pesticides in it, or rat poison, I think it was. And so you as a whale, right, when you get this refresh, you're basically, you don't have to go hunt right? For more resources or for more kills or merits, right? You basically get the best of both worlds. You just hang out in a kingdom. You wait until the merge happens, and then now you're able to go out there and start hunting again, right? I mean, the exception is that you've quadrupled your activity and your player base, right? So it just gives you a lot more targets. I mean, again, that's the reality of it. I will say, as kind of a counter, or I think a solution to that, is that they need to add in king tools, right? That we see in other kingdom builder games, where again, if you cap dragon or you do something, it gives you access to king tools and support options. For example, being able to send king's mails out, being able to do things maybe like in prison. That's something that's in rock. Maybe some type of negative titles, right? Things like that. Maybe they do something where you can even add like a tracking title, right? Where you put something on a player and it just tracks their location 24/7. I mean, there's ways you can be creative with it, but the idea is that, I hope, right, this will be something I'll probably make in a future video for suggestions, but they need to add in something like that, right, where you can have somewhat of, one alliance at a time holding, and then, have that option, of course, do rotations if need be, but something has to be there that offers the kingdom some type of management system that can happen from within the game. Next one here is that there's no migration feature at this time. Right? The only thing that we know is happening is merging. Now, I hope a migration feature does happen. I love the idea. I want to say this. I love the idea of merging. I'm excited to see how it plays out, right? From someone who's never played a game that does merging before. And I remember when I first started playing Kingdom Builders, I just thought the idea of merging was just horrendous. And as I got to play more, experience more, and then also looking at how Call of Dragons is introducing kingdom merging, honestly, I think it's very well thought out, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean to say that it's perfect or it's the worst thing ever, but I do think it is well thought out enough for them to be worthy of the opportunity for us to see how it plays out, right? Or kind of be given that chance. But the fact remains is that there is no migration feature. So because of that, you could do a merge, and it could just go poorly. Your kingdom could just, right, maybe you have alliances and players that are just defecting and leaving and forming other allies here in this new kingdom, and, unity is gone, and, maybe there's just a ginormous kingdom war, and it's just something you didn't sign up for, right? Maybe it's the opposite of what you experienced in your home kingdom, and your home kingdom's, standard, right? The things that you loved playing the game for because you were in that kingdom and you believed in that kingdom are now just no longer present in this new kingdom from the merge that happened. That could be something that gets you as a player to stop playing. Maybe you just don't want to play in that kingdom anymore, and you decide, I'm going to restart, or maybe I'm just going to stop and quit and not play anymore. These are things that can happen, and so it's just something to be cognizant of, and why I hope they will eventually add a migration feature in. I think if you were to combine kingdom merging along with a migration feature, man, you'd have the best of both worlds. I mean, and some may say it's redundant, but it's not. Trust me, you would literally have, right? You give players the option to go wherever they want, but you're still doing merging as well. I mean, to me, it's, kind of a double dose, right? You give people an out for those that want it, and at the same time, you are still maintaining the core of your game without having to compromise or change anything at a fundamental level. Then we get to the next con here, which is kingdom unity, right? I think, when you have a kingdom that can unify, and then you see that, and we talked about this a little before, right? When you see players or alliances that are kind of defecting or not, no longer allying with you and they go to ally elsewhere, that can be a demotivator. Right, that can be something that is a kind of soul crusher, if you will. And because of that, it presents its own challenges, where you may just feel, again, kind of similar to what I said, right? And this is kind of still on the cons, is why would I continue playing if, all these people that I was playing with, right? It could definitely create more drama, right? And, but I mean, it just depends on how you feel about that. These are just things that can happen. Okay, then we'll get to my last one here on con, which is that, and I touched on this briefly before, is that kingdom views and those in charge can change, right? And we touched on that a little bit where we talked about how, right, your kingdom can have a view. And if I was to give an example, right, some will look at Kingdom 4 right now and say, well, Kingdom 4 is pretty well unified, right? They were unified probably earlier than other kingdoms were. And that's why they're able to focus more on progression and development with their average players, and why we're seeing them as, when I do my last stats, right, a little bit before, I would say, a week or 2 weeks before recording this video, where they were closing in on the strongest kingdom in the game, right? They were the latest, or you could say youngest kingdom to come out from the 4 kingdoms at this time in beta. And they rose through the ranks to get to the number 2 strongest kingdom, and they're well on their way to number 1, right? And so that's something that you could say, well, what happens if all 4 kingdoms merge? And then you end up having a situation where it's not like that. Maybe it's just all-out war, right? And that's such a different view from when you're focusing purely on, or, you're focused on progressing for the most part, right? Even though they do organize PvP, it is just one of those things that no matter what, right? It's just one of those things you can't prepare every single player for. Or better yet, you can't anticipate how every single player, the average player, is going to react, right? Even though you could technically offer and prepare everyone in a kingdom, or at least give them the chance to, as much as possible. It is just one of those things that can happen, and that can also be a mental factor for why a player's philosophy has them playing in a kingdom or not playing in a kingdom, because of what they have grown to believe, what they've grown to enjoy, even more so. And so, I don't think that is not factored in. It very much is. Okay. Now we're going to get to the pros. So the pros, I think, of kingdom merging, and then I'll give some final thoughts at the end, right, is number 1, I think KvK simulation. I love the fact that, to me, it seems as though, and I was saying this earlier, that the impression I get from Call of Dragons is they have somewhat of a well-thought-out idea, a well-thought-out approach on, hey, we're going to reset seasons. We're going to merge 4 kingdoms together, right? That's an equal symmetrical number. We're going to reset all of these things so that way we can try and have the landscape be as fair as possible. And another way of looking at it is that the less universal things that you can level up, or that you have to level up to max, you can make an argument the more free-to-play friendly it is, right? Because if there's only so many things that you can level to max, and then you have, however many things that get reset, that means that everyone starts over fairly in that same way. And that means that everyone has to put in the same amount of work in order to get there. Now, whether that work is in time, is in effort, or if that's financial availability, you still have to start from the same point for in these multiple areas. And I think that is just one of the great features I like about the game that gives you that. It also helps you weed out inactivity, right? You know that when a season reset comes, those that are still there, still grinding, constantly re-leveling their accounts up in those areas that have been reset, right, are real troopers, right? Those are people that are here for the long haul. They have no problem grinding. They enjoy that about the game. That is something that is good for a kingdom. But the KvK simulation is something that and not to get too far off topic, is something I like about the merging. Because let's say, for example, in maybe an ideal situation, you have 4 kingdoms that are pretty close in power. You could, for example, right, you have 7 Zone 1 provinces. You could, for example, say, you know what, we're going to split these provinces and we're going to do 2-2-2-1, right? Or you'll take 7 and you'll divide that by 4, which, let me just do some math real quick, right? So we'll do 4 divided by 7, right? That comes out to, what is that, 0.57, right? And then we'll do, oh gosh, if I'm attempting to do hang on, that's not the right way. It has to be 7 divided by 4. There we go, right? So it's 1.75, almost 2. So maybe you do something where you say, hey, we're going to give everyone, 1.75 territory, right? Maybe you guys try and split the map in 1/4, right? Where you're splitting up all the behemoths in, total in 1/4, and then you can say something such as, well, every kingdom will get one province of their own, and then everyone will share at least one province with another. And that way you can kind of create somewhat of a kind of a fair split, right? Some type of 4-quadrant thing. And then, you let everyone, maybe you do something like a no rush type gig, right? You let everyone develop in zone 1, and then in zone 2 and in zone 3, you fight it out all day. Maybe you split it to a force, and then you first start fighting it out at a certain point after you let everyone develop in zone 1. Maybe you let everyone develop all the way until zone 3, and then everyone fights it out. Right? Maybe you do it where, no, it's just a free-for-all from day one. I don't know, for those of you that are familiar with like no rush games, we used to play these in Age of Empires, and I'm sure they have to be popular in other games, right? In short, what they are is no rush means that you have a certain amount of time to build up as much as you can, as fast as you can, to try and max out what you can, and then once the timer ends, everyone just goes at it, right? It's just a free-for-all at that point. And I always loved these games. I always loved doing it because I just always thought the way that you would approach the game is very different than if you're just doing it all from the get-go, right? Which is not to say that it's bad at all. It's just a different way of approaching. These are the types of things that if kingdom leadership comes to an agreement on, right, you can do. Now, that I think is much harder to obviously get to, that type of point or starting point, rather than, just letting everyone kind of do what they will or go at each other. It's just so much easier because you already have direct access in your starting zone 1s or your zone 1 districts. But the idea is there. And so I like the fact that they are trying to simulate a different way of doing a KvK through merges that I believe is well thought out. Then we get to kind of number 2, 3 here, which is I think that from doing merges, this incentivizes, I think, kingdom unity a little bit more. Meaning that because you know that it's your kingdom going in there against other kingdoms, there is more benefit, more long-term benefit, if you're able to unify your kingdom early and start building those relationships and establishing good rapport, good bonds for a while before you get to Season 2, which means that your kingdom over another can go in as more of a unified front, meaning that you're really looking at more of a true power equivalent, or I guess true power indicator, meaning that if a kingdom's, let's say you have a kingdom, let's say everyone has a kingdom true power of not 2 million, let's just say 2 billion, and you have one kingdom that isn't fully unified, so their power is kind of dispersed. Let's say their strongest alliance is 800 million. Then you have another kingdom who has a few alliances that are still unified, but not everyone. Let's say their power is 1.3 billion. Then you have a kingdom who's mostly unified, but there's 1 or 2 active alliances that are just not really on board. Let's say their power is 1.5 billion, 1.6. Then let's say you have a kingdom in which all of their active alliances are on board and fully unified, and they have a true kingdom power of 2 billion. The thing is that if you go in to a merged kingdom with more allies at your disposal, and then you can, right, in meaning that within your home kingdom, if you can go in with arguably every strong active alliance, and you guys are all on the same page, that can be just as powerful and just as potent as if you, well, I guess the comparison would be if you were just going into kind of a standard KvK for Rockets, you're going in with your home kingdom. But that is something I think that has to be taken into consideration compared to the kind of other side of it where you're not fully unified. And now, you don't know. There's toss-ups on what can happen. And so that's just something I think to keep in mind, is that I like the idea that this kind of incentivizes, because it means that you could arguably be, a stronger force in a kingdom. Let's say even if another kingdom is stronger than you, what if they're not truly unified like your kingdom is? You arguably could be stronger and more prepared than they are, which means you may have more leverage over that kingdom in certain situations that may arise. So it presents its own opportunities as well. Then we get to my number 3 point for pros, which is that you get to start over with leveled accounts. I think the idea of starting over from scratch, even though it's the same map, but the fact is that you have 3 brand new kingdoms worth of players and alliances that are now joining, and you guys are all playing on the same kingdom. To me, that's fun, right? You get to a point where you're seeing new faces, more people are being social, and you're able to kind of start over on this journey almost as though it's another day one kingdom, right? Because there's a bunch of new players. To me, that's fun. And then the next one here is, and this kind of is an extension of number 3, number 4 would just be increased overall activity, right? I don't think anyone would be mad at having a lot more active players in the game. And, again, pros and cons that comes with in and of itself. But the fact is that you are quadrupling your kingdom's activity and player base, right, depending on how many players are coming from each kingdom, once you get to post-merge, and you're now in a new kingdom altogether. Then the next one here is that I think group projects will be ever more important than they probably have ever been in Rock. And I say that because it ties back into the volatility thing that we were talking about for number 1 on the con side, is that I actually think larger groups are going to be more of a benefit and are going to be seen as more valuable going into kingdoms with an organized large amount of alliances because of the fact that merges are going to happen. You're going to want to try and do things that can give you a higher percentage chance of guaranteeing that you're going to have a larger amount of unified alliances within a kingdom for when the merge happens. Why? Because you want to try and ensure that the leaders of those alliances are all going to want to stick together and actually approach and come in, or I guess go out and then into a new situation as a united front. This situation that can benefit is spawned from you developing those relationships earlier rather than later. And the earliest you can really start doing that is before a kingdom opens, when you're in a project together. Compared to if you go into a kingdom as an individual solo alliance and a bunch of other individual players have their own solo alliances, and then you guys are just a bunch of individuals coming to the table and trying to agree on things. In groups, you have the option of pretty much already agreeing on things before you even start. This allows for you to kind of cut out a lot of the drama and a lot of the middlemen-ish and the too many cooks in a kitchen situation that often can happen in these games. So I think that's something that is a pro when it comes to establishing your kingdom that will then factor into when merges happen for Season 2. And then I think the last one here, as far as my kind of most top 6 points, is I think this is going to help with player retention. Right? I think overall, even though yes, player drop-off can and will be a thing, I think the important part here to look at is that when one of the things you'll often hear from some players is that, oh, the kingdom's dead, it's dying, I wish we could merge, or, hey, no one's helping, I'm going to leave and go migrate somewhere else. The fact of the matter is that activity is king, right? Players enjoy playing in kingdoms that are very healthy with activity. We're not talking overall health, but just with activity health, that is a big morale booster. It's a big motivator, right? Being able to get online and see that Tamara's chat or world chat is just constantly popping off with social engagement. And you're also able to even build out something like a Kingdom Discord even that much more. You start getting a lot more people in there. Maybe you start having conversations and you're doing more events because you have more people that are willing to help out with management. I mean, there are actually a lot of positives that can happen from this due to you just being able to keep and retain players in a kingdom for longer rather than shorter. However, I will add in lastly that, again, and as I mentioned, this will affect some player drop-off. I just think that this will do a little bit more on the player retention side as a positive rather than a overwhelming negative. Okay, that pretty much covers my pros and cons here for Kingdom merging. I guess the last thing I'll leave you with in my conclusive thoughts is that I, for one, and I'm sure others can agree, is being able just to wait and see how things are going to play out, right? The fact is that a lot of what you hear me talk about are facts, but then some is speculation because there are just some things we don't know. The facts are from what I've experienced playing in new kingdoms, playing in kingdoms where you have a lot of migrants that are coming in, and it kind of almost simulates something like a merge, right? Especially if you're bringing in half the power, or you're doubling or tripling your power, right? That kind of simulates, and those types of things happen in Rock and other kingdom builders. And even though it's not specifically a merge, it is eerily close and similar. And so these are things that I think are just important to be mindful of. And it goes back to what I was saying before, is that I at least am excited to see how things will play out. And I think CoD has a good groundwork set up and established when it comes to their planning going into merging. And so that, for me, I'm looking forward to see how that'll play out in Season 2 and Season 3. And, of course, we'll cover it closely and, provide our constructive feedback and, criticism where and when appropriate. That's pretty much it for me, though. I'm going to pass the question off to you guys now. What do you think are the biggest pros and the biggest cons of kingdom merging? Additionally, do you agree? Do you disagree with any points that I brought up? Do you have different points that you think are equally or even more relevant to what the positives and downsides could be of doing kingdom merges? If so, let me know in the comments down below. That is it for me. As always, until next time, I will catch you later.